Hey, what is up, everyone? Kolst here, and there has been a new mini set announced for Showdown Badlands. Set, it is called Delve into Deepholm, so I'm going to talk about the first full day's worth of cards to review, and also just the other things like the new mechanics. Just really jump right into that. And by the way, it's the same as every other mini set, so I'm going to assume you know all this already, so let's just dive straight in. Oh, and by the way, the reviews covered in this video are going to cover the classes from the first day, which I believe were like Demon Hunter, Rogue, Warrior, and Priest mainly, as well as a lot of the neutral cards. I think there might still be a legendary not revealed possibly, but be most of the neutrals as well. The first thing they have here that's very critical, because this will impact a lot of the existing set as well, is that there are 3 new Excavates added to the game. Both a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 treasure there. The second thing I'll just mention briefly as well is that there are dual class cards, which we'll be reviewing many of first. But in any case, so the first kind of card review here at tier 1, we have, I think what's going to be, depends on situation. Sometimes rock is better, but like Heart Blossom here is the best board treasure they have made. This is give a friendly minion +2/+2, deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion. You're hoping that early on you're going to be able to use that buff and that damage relatively easily. Of course, it requires you to have a minion, so it's not always going to quite work out. 2 damage might not kill something, right? It might not be clean how it would work out, but it's a lot of potential there, right? It's very strong. The next one we have here, which is very reliable and very strong, is the Deepholm Geode, because this is the tier 2 treasure, and this is 2 mana 1/2 elemental at the end of your turn. Deal 2 damage to all enemies. You compare this to one of the better, I wouldn't say better, but like a decent option at tier 2 is deal 3 damage to a minion and the enemy hero. Well, this deals 2 damage to an enemy and the enemy hero, but also it just hits the entire rest of the board too, right? So, and it leaves a 1/2, and there's a potential you could do it multiple times. You can protect this behind taunt in theory. You could even give it stealth possibly. There's a way to do that later, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of potential because sometimes your opponent, even though it's just 2 health, like sometimes they might not be able to kill it, right? So it's just a very, very strong card. You don't need it to stick. It usually won't, but there's a chance it will, so it's a very potentially strong effect. And the third one here, World Pillar Fragment. 3 mana epic, discover an elemental to summon, add the others to your hand. One thing before you panic, because I panicked when I saw this too, very important thing to note is that Neptulon cannot be created by this. Or any other, are there any other colossals? I don't know. But like, the point is, it counts as like a summon, not as a discover, not as a add to hand, so you're not actually able to generate a colossal. Very important there. With that knowledge, this thing isn't probably that insane. Of course, it's going to depend on rotation, obviously. There are some good elementals. There's some neutral ones that are like very high costed cards, so there are some high rolls to hit. Knowing that, it is also possible low roll, so sometimes you'll, compared to like, you know, get a 5 cost minion, this will be, I think, often better because you probably get comparable amount of stats, but you also get 2 cards to hand. Even though they're just elementals, they might not be the greatest thing, but like, it's probably going to be pretty good. So I think it is still going to be one of the best tier 3 treasures. So overall, just very strong treasures being added here. So Excavate is just, I believe, generally getting a buff. So, you know, Burrow Buster already one of the best cards in the game. For example, even in a non-Excavate class, just got even better. So important thing to note there. And then the second piece of this is just that, yeah, there are dual class cards, and I believe that's everything to talk about. I'm not going to talk about this right now because, of course, we're going to go through all of the cards, so we will jump into that now. So the first card we have here, and it is the first dual class card as well, Shadestone Skulker. This is a class card for Demon Hunter and Rogue. I should probably mention, by the way, if you just don't know how that works, they just become draftable in both classes, so, and discoverable in both classes too, by the way. 1 mana 1/1 elemental, rush Battlecry, take your weapon and gain its stats, death rattle, give it back. This thing's probably going to, you'd imagine, die most of the time, so like, you're going to get the weapon back like by the time you would even want to use it anyway, so that's usually not going to be like, there's not usually not going to be any awkward thing around this. Obviously the big idea of this would be you have a big weapon and you get basically a giant 1 mana rush minion essentially for free. It's good in concept, you can imagine, like if you have like, I don't know, like a Flame Reaper equipped, for example. Okay, this thing becomes what, a 6/4 rush. I believe it gains the stats, right? So yeah, 6/4 rush. which is very good. It might even value trade in that case, but a lot of the times you're just not going to have that, I think, is the problem. This is in Rogue and Demon Hunter, and this is going to depend on the rotation that happens to be in Arena in any given time. But currently, right, other than I get like exactly Flame Reaper and Demon Hunter, like you really just don't have any sizable weapons. I don't believe there are any sizable weapons that have been revealed up to this point either. For example, like if you just have like a 1-2 weapon, like a rogue dagger, for example, I don't think this is, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever to have like a 2-2 rush, but you had to have daggered already. It's like a little bit or a 2-3 rush, I don't know. But now that I think about it, because it is a 1 cost, like even with a rogue dagger, I guess it's a 2-3. Hey, that's actually pretty good, right? It's only a 1-mana card. You can't have that high expectations, right? So I think it would actually make it relatively pickable in Rogue. It'd be a good combo activator and stuff. But in Demon Hunter, you're just a lot more likely to just not have a weapon at all, probably, and it's just, you know, not going to be reliably anything. So I think that makes it pretty bad in that class. But again, Rogue isn't going to have nearly as many high rolls because Rogue just doesn't tend to have that many weapons. But next up, we have Fell Fissure. This is a Demon Hunter card, only Demon Hunter, 4 mana. Fell spell, deal 2 damage to all minions at the start of your next turn. Deal 2 more damage to all minions. So it's like a sigil card basically, but instead of just being a sigil for like, you know, a next turn effect, it actually casts it immediately as well. So you're getting a lot of AoE damage from this here. It's 4 AoE damage to all minions. The idea of this obviously would be that you're not going to want to be like someone developing board yourself and playing this. You're going to want to be the guy that's kind of off board and just sitting back, and you get a lot of AoE value, basically like, you know, an old flame strike over, but it's just over 2 turns. Ideally, you're removing damage both turns this way, and it's going to restrict what your opponent's even going to want to play into it. That definitely has potential to be a good card in Arena. The thing is, I mean, right now, for example, if you're playing Demon Hunter, you want to be the aggressor, you want to be pushing damage through with wolves and stuff, and I just, you know, you don't really see how this fits through. You could still theoretically play it on 4 and then go into wolves, but you want to be pushing damage from early on. So it just doesn't really fit into current Arena Demon Hunter as you generally want to play it. It is possible to have a late game Demon Hunter, but it's just not very common. And this would fit into that deck, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense with how Demon Hunter usually gets played in Arena right now. So not a terrible card, but just probably not what you're going to be looking for most of the time in that class. Next up, we have Quick Pick. This is also a Demon Hunter Rogue dual class card. So it does give at least something to play with the 1-drop here, the Skulker, but not a super high value option. But it's the 2-mana 1/2 weapon. After your hero attacks, draw a card. It's literally just a hero power, except it also casts like a kind of delayed arcane intellect. Well, I should have said in Rogue. I think I might have said Demon Hunter, but like, and in Demon Hunter, it's just something that, you know, it's weird because it overlaps with your hero power, but it does the same thing. And again, it's just something that you can use it with your hero power to deal 2 damage to 1. You know, it's generally nice to have those kind of things. So overall, I think in both of these classes, I mean, it's a pickable card. If you want draw, and there's always a little bit of draw you want, you can take these. I mean, it's a solid card. It's not something that's gonna be like, oh yeah, oh, I'm so glad I have this, but it's a serviceable card. You'll be glad to have it. I think especially with Rogue, it's gonna be good to just have a little bit of cycle just to improve the consistency of some of your combos and stuff. But in Demon Hunter, it's just kind of gonna one of many ways to draw cards there, so not really needed. Next up, we have another Demon Hunter card, but this one is dual class Demon Hunter and Warrior. It is called Burning Heart. 1 mana fire spell, deal 2 damage to a minion. If it survives, give your hero +3 attack this turn. Sometimes you just kill something off if you're desperate for a ping, particularly in Warrior, or you just can't take damage in Demon Hunter, you can use it that way. But most of the time you're going to use this as 5 damage removal on something. It's weird because it's kind of like the same activation as Slam from Warrior, except it's just a different effect. You're getting +3 attack instead of, you know, the card draw, which makes it just a generally very efficient card, but also very critical that, I mean, it also is just 3 face damage if you need it to end a game. So overall, I mean, it's just a very efficient card. I mean, you have like 1 mana execute and stuff in this game, and like other cards are 1 mana kill everything. It's not as efficient as a removal as those cards, but I think the fact that, you know, you can hit 2 things potentially and have that somehow work out just with trades, but also the fact that you can actually push base damage with it as well. That seems like enough to make this, you know, a pretty reasonable card. You would still probably take 1 mana kill everything, but this card is actually probably closer to that than you would think just because of that flexibility. But with that, next up we have Crimson Expanse. 4 mana, location with 2 charges. Choose a damaged minion, summon a copy of it that goes dormant for 1 turn. And this is in Demon Hunter and Warrior as well. It's especially weird to have this in Demon Hunter because Demon Hunter does not do anything like this. You know, Warrior has ways to like copy damaged minions and stuff. That's not unusual, but Demon Hunter having this is very new because, you know, you can copy like an extra. Once a wolf trades, for example, this is something you might be doing in Arena now. You can trade a wolf into a 1 attack minion and then just copy another wolf. You get a 6/5 the next turn, right? You know, do something like that. But also, you know, and the way you would use it in Warrior a lot as well. You can use it on your own buff minions, or obviously use this on an enemy. It does not specify which side of the board. You can use this on enemies as well. So anytime your opponent plays something big, you can essentially steal it. And if you have execute in Warrior, you can, you know, execute it at the same time. So a lot of potential here. This is a slightly slow card. It would fit again more into, again, you can make it work with wolves in any archetype, but it would be more into a slower version of Demon Hunter, which is again a little bit awkward, but it had that other support in this set. So the fit in Demon Hunter, I think, is a little bit more awkward, but obviously in Warrior, this is something you're going to be very happy to have because there's the 3 mana card, which is just way worse than this effectively because this is a 4 mana location that you get 2 of, where, you know, that 3-drop, which used to be a 2-drop, but it got nerfed. That's a very good card, and yeah, you'd much rather just have this just for the extra charge, like almost always. So just a very good card, especially in Warrior. Next up, we're going to be moving on to the next group of classes, which is this one is Rogue, which we did talk about a little bit earlier, but also Rogue with Priest. So the first card here is Hidden Gem. 2 mana, 2/2, elemental with stealth, permanent stealth. At the end of your turn, restore 2 health to all friendly characters. So it's a little bit interesting because, I mean, on turn 2, you probably don't care about that much, but I mean, if you get this down on turn 2 and your opponent doesn't have like actual area of effect damage to clear this off, you can just keep it stealth forever. And then what? You're probably going to end up having like what, like 16, 18, 20 health. I mean, you're not going to die, right? Unless your opponent really builds up a board that keeps smacking you. So it is potential to just have a lot of healing. And that's something that Rogue does not have, right? Or did not have. Now suddenly Rogue has healing. So that's very interesting just for that reason, just to keep yourself alive. But on top of that, you know, this is also a snowball tool, right? You can, if you have a board and you start taking value trades, you play this thing, or you already had this thing on the board. It heals up all your stuff and then play the board, and then you just, this thing gives you a whole lot of value. It's like a super buffed up healing totem that your opponent can't even target to remove, right? So a lot of potential there just for both of those reasons. I think it's going to be a very solid card, especially if you're a tempo player. Just the ability to abuse that tempo wise is going to be really good because, you know, you're going to heal a lot of your stuff out of AoE range, and the same AoE they need to use to clear this off. So they'll AoE this, but then they won't be able to finish off your entire board most likely. It's just it's a very powerful effect for a tempo deck, and also potential healing for a slower deck as well. Actually a very useful card for Arena. Next up we have Shadowward Steel. This is a dual class card, again for Priest and Rogue, unfortunately, based off what the effect is. Depends on if you like this. So this is the kind of thing that a lot of people like having, but don't like playing against. But this is like 5 mana Shadow Spell, return an enemy minion to your hand. So it's like Entomb, where it put it into your deck, except it doesn't just put it into your deck, it just gets it into your hand. So anytime your opponent plays a legendary or whatever, yeah, it's your legendary now. I mean, it's strong because you used to assassinate a minion for this cost. The game's been power crept out of that. So it is, you know, considered expensive if you're just using this as an assassinate. But obviously there's a lot of bigger things. You're effectively silence removing something. And you also get battle cries from this. So I think that's more than worth, like, you know, the 1 mana you're paying over an assassinate for this. So it's a very strong card, and you're going to be seeing a lot. It is a rare, so it's not going to be like the most common thing, but yeah, it'll be a very impactful card in Arena that everyone will pick every time they see it pretty much. Next up we have Fool's Gold, a rogue card. 1 mana spell, get a random golden pirate and elemental from other classes. It's going to depend on rotation. Obviously, there is a chance, specifically with the elemental, there's a little bit of an awkwardness because there's a chance you get one that requires elemental synergy. You don't have any other elementals, right? And that could be really awkward, right? But most of the time, I mean, pirates and elementals, a lot of pirates are just like tempo cards, which is weird because you're having to pay mana for this. But, you know, most of the time you're going to be getting like 2 reasonably serviceable cards. They might not be ideal for your situation, but you're getting 2 cards for 1 mana. A card like this can't be that bad because it's just mana efficient. It's relatively cheap value. It's going to be reasonable. It's just that Rogue has so many ways to generate things at this point that you wouldn't have to prioritize something like this, but it's something that you could pick. So next up we have Deep Miner Brann, Highlander card for Warrior. So impacted by the legendary change, making it so you can actually build around these if you choose to, even though that tends to be a bait in Arena. But I should probably make a video talking about that at some point, because it often is a bait. I don't know if everyone's caught on to that. The Highlander cards are almost always really bad to draft. And this is probably no exception, because this is Deep Miner Brann, 6 mana 2 for Battle Cry. If your deck has no duplicates, your Battle Cries trigger twice for the rest of the game. The thing is that there are some things in Arena that could be very good with this. Well, for example, I mean, if you're going for the Excavate package, right? Some of the Excavates are Battle Cries, the neutral ones specifically, right? So that could be very good. And then, I mean, the legendary Excavate in Warrior is also a Battle Cry. So you would actually get 4 8-drops instead of just 2, right? So there's some potential here, right? There is, but this is just an absurdly greedy card. There aren't enough, I think, especially in Warrior. It's real. Well, first of all, in Arena, it's really hard to play a 6 mana 2 for, but it's also just not guaranteed that you're gonna have that many Battle Cries. There are a lot more than there used to be, but yeah, I mean, the thing is like, even in Ignis, I found to be pretty hard to actually play, you know? It's just very risky to get this. You're not guaranteed to have that much upside, and you're not guaranteed to have the time to play it. But it's definitely one of those things where you're going to see it completely work and be super, super strong. But I think it's just very, very risky, so I would draft with caution. For those reasons, I think it's going to be on the lower end of win rates, but I'm honestly not 100% sure. I could be wrong with that one. It might actually be really good. It's going to depend on just, you know, how good Warrior remains. Because it's just one of those things where it's going to work sometimes and it's just not going to work other times. And with that, I do believe that is it for the class reveals. We will jump into the neutrals now. The first one we have here will go by Ascending Cost. It's Shale Spider. This is, there are a couple elementals here actually. So for some of these cards with elementals, it's going to be important. But 2 mana 3/2 elemental Battle Cry. If you played an elemental last turn, draw a card. This is going to be a pretty decent card in actually elemental classes, right? You know, like Shaman specifically, for example, right? Because you can very often curve into this elemental into elemental in Shaman, for example. In a lot of other classes, this probably just isn't going to be that good, however, because you still, I mean, you may have some, because there are some neutral ones here, but like still, you're not likely to have that many elementals, and you're even less likely. You're almost never going to be like curving into this with an elemental, right? So then it's a 2 mana 3/2, which by modern standards is garbage. I would think you're just not going to draft this a lot for that reason. If you're Shaman, you would be a lot more likely to pick it, because then it's like kind of like Nimbus, right? I think a random elemental might even be better than a draw. I don't know, but like draft with caution for that one. Next up, we have Iridescent Gyreworm or Gyreworm. 3 mana 4/3 elemental. Again, this is an epic card, so you won't see it much, because neutral epics are like rare than legendaries now. But yeah, Death Rattle, give each of your minions a random bonus effect. It's not clear actually from this text. You get the same bonus effect. It's the way it's worded, I think that implies you get like a different one on each one. Kind of like Enhanced Mechano used to be. That's my guess off of this. But in any case, I mean, this card usually probably isn't going to be the greatest thing. On curve, it has a lot of potential, right? Because it's a playable curve minion, even though 4/3s are pretty darn vulnerable by this state. But it forces removal, right? Because I mean, this thing is terrifying. Your opponent's not going to want to leave it up. The problem is that I mean, honestly, it's just like the odds of you actually getting relevant stuff on curve isn't actually that likely anyway. Like Divine Shield's great, obviously, but like a lot of the other things, like there could be funny things with like stealth, for example, and poison could work, but usually not on curve, right? Like this is more like something that's like something where if you're already winning, you can pull this, you can throw this on the board while you're like massively winning and then be even more winning, which is worth something, right? But on curve, I just don't think it's gonna really be that great that often. And just we're past the point where like just playable curve things that are occasionally good or even considered good cards. So I mean, I think this is draftable, but you're just not gonna see it much for this reason, mainly largely because it's an epic, and I don't think it's going to be great. It's going to be fine, but it's just not going to be a great card. Next up, we have another elemental in the neutrals, and this one's also a dragon. It's called Stone Drake, 6 mana, 2/8, Divine Shield, Taunt, and Lifesteal, with cannot be targeted by spells or hero powers as well. So, I mean, this is a funny one because this is, I mean, it's pretty much just like that one tier 3 treasure, right? Like it's very similar. I mean, this one also has Lifesteal, but it has Divine Shield instead of Reborn. So, I mean, obviously the whole point of this is like, it's not going to do that much on most boards just because it's at 6 mana. There have been other cards like this, like there was a 2/10 that froze anything that hit it, right? It's like, okay, it's going to be very annoying. It's going to slow your opponent down. This thing's going to heal you, which is potentially very important, right? And they can't remove it without minions, so you're going to get the healing almost always. There's still ways to remove it, but you're almost always going to get healing. So it is very good, and it is going to slow your opponent down, and it can also be used to protect your board as well, to be very annoying blocker there. Still, generally speaking, I mean, imagine like playing this and then your opponent plays wolves, for example, you know, so there's so many like giant rushes that kind of makes this kind of thing like just very terrifying. I think overall, you know, it's just one of those things where if you're a stall deck, especially if you're a warrior, you know, you can buff this and then this thing starts to look really good also. In that case, it's really good if you're just playing any kind of deck that's really happy to stall because you have really insane late game cards that you just need to stay alive for. That makes it a lot more pickable, but I think in just general decks, you wouldn't value it super, super highly. You could still pick it even in basically any deck because it'll still serve a role, but you wouldn't be, you know, super excited for it. You'd be about as excited for, frankly, like the elemental and dragon synergies that you might be unlocking by having it more than you are from what the card is actually doing. So it's an alright card overall. Gonna be better in some decks than others. With that, next up we have Marut Stonebinder. This is again one of the Highlander cards for neutral this time. 7 mana, 5/6, Battle Cry. If your deck has no duplicates, discover an elemental summon, add the others to your hand. And by the way, if you are wondering, yes, that is literally exactly the same effect as this tier 3 Excavate, which is an interesting decision, but yeah, that is intentional. That, yeah, it's just the exact same effect. The thing is as I said, like, you're not that likely. You can't get like an Upjohn again, and you can high roll this, obviously, right? It's going to be good, but like the concern I have with this card is like, you're going Highlander for this, you know, for this effect, like really? Because you do need to get like something good. It's like, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. I mean, like I'd rather have a Dragon Queen Alexstrasza than this, you know, and I don't draft Dragon Queen Alexstrasza because it's garbage in Arena right now, you know, so it's like, this just doesn't seem very good to me. Like I'm concerned and constructed. I'm talking mostly about Arena, if that wasn't obvious already. I hope people figured that out by now, but like I don't even know, do Highlander decks even run this in Constructed? I kind of feel like they don't. Like, it just doesn't seem good enough. It'll probably get buffed or something, but yeah. Unless I'm really underestimating this effect, but I don't think it is. It's just it just doesn't seem worth it. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, if you could have this card, fine, but going Highlander for it, like, no. So that's kind of my thought with that one. And with that, the last card we have here is Therazane. 7 mana, 7/5 elemental with Taunt and Death Rattle. Double the stats of all elementals in your hand and deck. This is a weird one for Arena because of the one legendary and first pick legendary rule, because I mean, there's only a couple classes where this is even remotely pickable in, right? Like because you just aren't gonna have that many elementals. You could, I mean, theoretically, you could get like a bunch of stone drakes and stuff, right? And then this could be pickable in any class. But this is like, this is a common, but still commons are only in like what, 20% of decks. So like you usually don't get it. Like realistically, you just can't pick this card unless it's like an exactly shaman or one of like, I don't know, there usually aren't that many other classes that really have a playable number of elementals. So it's like in most classes, you just, I mean, you're just not going to take this. If you're shaman, you probably take it. And there might be like 1 or 2 classes where it's pickable, maybe, but you probably would rather not even take the risk, to be honest. It's basically a class card, but other classes are just going to have it as a dead legendary pick, potentially. So a little weird for that reason. But with that, yeah, let me know what you think about all that stuff in the comment section below. I'm actually going to record the next video right now for the next reveal. So yeah, appreciate everyone hanging out. We'll see you guys in the next one. Hit all the buttons, like, subscribe, all that stuff, blah, blah. All right, bye-bye.